Good evening. Welcome to Legally Speaking. I'm your host, Judge Yemi Kings. Legally Speaking is a part of the Women for Progress Media Network. It airs Mondays at 6 to 7 p.m. You can catch our podcast here on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, and also live at www.womenforprogressradio.com. Today, we have a special guest, Councilman Brian Grizzell. He's going to be discussing various topics, including municipal government, the legislative process, and the roles of the city council and the mayor. Um, Dr. Grizzell, Dr. Brian Grizzell is a Ward 4 city councilman for the city of Jackson, Mississippi. Currently serves as the president of the Jackson City Council. He's been the Ward 4 councilman since 2021. Dr. Grizzell, we're just going to start by asking some questions. First of all, I hear folks always say we have a strong mayor, weak council form of government. And can you just start off by explaining to us what that means?
All right. Good evening, everybody. So, with respect to strong mayor weak council, the way that form of government works, you have two governing bodies, all right, and it kind of serves like a check and balance. But when you have the strong mayor weak council, that simply means that the mayor is the CEO of the city of Jackson, and so that means that the mayor carries out the daily duties, the daily operations for the city of Jackson. That means he or she controls or delegates all duties. He or she controls all aspects of operations, and they also direct the city employees. Under the Strong Mayor Weak Council, basically all we are charged with, the council members, is passing a budget, managing the budget. We pay the bills. We help to work with the mayor and to plan out the daily activities and make sure that things get taken care of with respect to, roads and bridges in our wards. We serve as a liaison between the administration and the constituents, and we just make sure that we pass the laws, we write the laws, we pass them, we pay the bills, we plan the budget, and we just help to carry out the priorities of our constituents, and we advocate. Advocacy is very important for us, and so I mean that's pretty much it. And I don't want to go too deep into it, but sometimes folks will call and say, "Hey, Grizzell, can you get this street paid?" Well, I can put it on the list and ask the mayor to pave the street. And just like when we were planning out the whole budget, we each gave a list of priorities, a list of streets, a list of ditches, a list of bridges that we need repaired in our wards. And so we also met with the engineering firm, IMS, and we helped to plan it out in terms of what the budget should look like, where the money is coming from, and how we're going to allocate it to make sure that these things get taken care of. But once we hand the budget over to the mayor, it is his responsibility to make sure that these projects are completed as best as possible. I kind of think of the mayor also as a city manager. Yeah, he goes around and gives speeches, shake hands, kiss babies. But again, he's the CEO of the city, and it is his duty to carry out all of those projects.
All right. Since getting elected in January of this year and getting sworn in, it's really hit home to me that a lot of times um, people don't have a clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities of different elected officials. I have folks that have told me that I need to make sure that certain water gets turned back on or sign an order to make, all kind of stuff. And I tell folks like, look, if I could do all this stuff, I probably could do it. But if I do it, I'll be sitting in front of a judge myself because I'll be breaking the law because I'm just not able to do it. So a lot of time folks don't understand or don't know the different roles and responsibilities of the council. Can you tell us what are the core responsibilities of the city council and also compare that to the mayor's office?
So, again, we are the keepers of the budget, and we write the laws. That's your ordinances. And the way things are, from the way the law was intended many years ago, they're a bit different because we have the CCID now, which has its own courts, it has its own police force. We also have third-party administrator overseeing the water, which of course he responds to the federal judge Wingate. And then, of course, again, I don't want to make it seem like our duties are mitigated, but Again, our primary focus is to make sure that that budget is top tier, and make sure that we give the mayor what he needs to be successful. Um, and in that, uh, it's important to make sure that we're working together and making sure that we're carrying out the mandates set forth by the people, the citizens of Jackson. Also, and I think it's really important for us to understand that, we talk about what Hinds County doing. You still have the Hinds County supervisors. The Hinds County supervisors are technically the mayor for the county, right? They are the executive branch for the county. I think they would oversee judge pays and making sure that y'all's facilities are taken care of, and making sure that the jail is taken care of, and all of that kind of stuff. But the city of Jackson has a mayor. And so, again, it's important for the mayor, for the council to provide those priorities to the mayor. Of course, the mayor has his own priorities. The mayor appoints the police chief, we confirm. But one thing that's really important, like the supervisors can enter into contracts, city council members cannot enter into contracts. And so, we can't get into the whole bidding process. We can bring some people to the table, but it's up to the mayor to make sure that the contracts are executed, make sure they're signed. And then, of course, we provide check and balance because, say, for instance, if we vote on something, the mayor can override that vote. He can veto that vote, but then it will take a majority of us, 5 votes, to come back and override the mayor. And it kind of works almost like Congress and the president, as well as the governor and the state legislature.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So in practice, how does this system of the strong mayor weak council, how does that affect how policy is developed, debated, and implemented in Jackson?
So I like to tell folks all the time, it pays to get along. You got to get along. The mayor can't really do much without a council, and the council can't do much without a mayor. And so, you have a lot of chess moves, you have a lot of give and take. But when you compare our form of government, Jackson's form of government, with what's around us, say, for instance, Clinton has a board of aldermen. Their mayor actually gets to vote in a tie-breaking type
Mm,
situation. Whereas in Jackson, our mayor does not get a vote. He just gets a veto, right?
okay.
Same thing with Byram. Their mayor gets a tie-breaking vote. But again, that's how things are done differently. And all municipalities disagree. In Jackson, you have 7 wards, 7 different personalities. You have a unified set of needs, but then you have other interests. And so it's important to be able to bring all of that together and work with each other. I tell the mayor all the time, he'll call me and ask me something. I said, well, I got to get you 4 votes. But interestingly, we've been hitting 7, all 7. We got Councilman Stokes voting on claims, so he's paying the bills again, and he's been pretty clear that he's been really trusting and wants to support this mayor. And so it takes a lot of it. It takes a lot of work to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're sending the right message to the people that we're all working together.
Okay. So, Dr. Grizzell, what are some of the misconceptions that residents often have about what the council can or cannot do?
Honestly, again, it goes back to really basic civics, understanding, as you stated in the beginning, the role of each seat. And I think for a while, sometimes we get into these seats and, we don't drive our own tractor, but it's important to drive your own tractor to make sure that, one, you're not encroaching on somebody else's duty, but also to make sure that you have the relationship necessary. Again, a lot of times people say, Grizzell, you need to fix this bridge. They may call out one of the supervisors who may have jumped in to do something, right? Well,
Mhm,
that supervisor has more authority than the city councilman does,
mhm,
because the supervisors can enter the contracts, the supervisors can direct employees, the supervisors can pave just like the city of Jackson can pave. The supervisors can also, clean dishes and anything else, because primarily they're responsible for the rural areas, but we're all in the county. We all pay county taxes. And so, when I try to tell people the difference, they try to look at, sometimes like I'm just giving an excuse, but it's not, it's the truth. And I think about years ago when I, was really getting engaged in the political process, I would hear my predecessor to keep the stamps, and also um, Melvin Priester, who was also a councilman at the time, tried to explain these same things to a lot of the residents. And I see that, it just really depends on who's listening and who's willing to accept it. But at the end of the day, the process is the process, and you just got to be patient and just try to keep communicating to people, to the residents, what you can and cannot do. But also reiterate the fact, that I will go to the mayor and I will try to get this done. Because again, the council can't do anything without the mayor, and the mayor can't do much without the council.
Okay. So, Dr. Grizzell, you can't go and tell a city employee, hey, I want you to go do X, Y, Z. You don't have that power, do
No,
you?
no. We don't have that kind of power. And I will say, I do have the respect of a lot of the city employees. I try to make sure that they're taken care of, especially with respect to policy. Make sure that they have what they need to be successful. Try to give a raise when we can. And sometimes public works. I've bought lunch before, but again, those relationships are really important. Now, this mayor, Mayor Horn, has made it very clear, which is kind of different from in the past. We will have full access to employees, right? So I don't have to just necessarily call the mayor and say, hey, can you have someone go out and do this? I can call the public works director myself. I can call the director of human and cultural services myself. And that has not always been the case with previous councils and previous administrations. So I really appreciate that because it helped to forge a new relationship this time.
I mean, that's great because I mean, the council, you all are, the first line of defense between, the residents and municipal government. So a lot of times we're coming to you all with these complaints, and it's good that you all have a chance to actually address those things and address the department heads. That's good to hear.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so how does the council create, amend, or repeal city ordinances, and what does that process look like from start to finish?
So, excuse me, you got to have 4 votes to do anything. 7 votes always looks a lot better than just getting 4 votes.
Mhm.
Sometimes folks say, the 4-3 split. But I want to be clear, we've been voting seven down, 7 up on most things now. But the process, each council member can write laws. It's up to him or her to get the votes necessary. And so say for instance, when I wrote the fireworks ordinance, we got it passed 7-0. I wrote it. I kind of sent it. I kind of bounced the idea around to all my colleagues because I needed to know where my votes were going to come from. Again, you just need 4. You want 7. You want 6, but 4 will get it passed. And so once I wrote it, I sent it to the clerk of council, got her feedback. We also have a policy analyst in our office, got her feedback, and then we sent it to the city attorney. You always want the city attorney to check what you wrote for legal sufficiency. If
Right.
there's a problem, we can, either put it in committee or get it on the floor and edit it that way or amend it that way. But once you get the city attorney to sign off, we get it on the floor. We can, talk it out. A lot of times, it'll go ahead and pass as written. And so that's basically how it is. We talk about city ordinances. Back when we were growing up, you got that little cartoon that say, I'm just a bill
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sitting on top of the hill. Well, it's pretty much the same thing. I'm just an ordinance, and it goes pretty much through the same process. If there's something that's real controversial, the council president has the lead way to put things into committee, and those committee chairs will take it up in their committee. And if something goes into committee, if it does not die, like it does at the federal level or at the state level, if it does not die in one of our committees and we vote it out, get it back on the floor before the council during one of our regular planned meetings. And then, once we vote it up or down, if it votes up, then it becomes law in about 30 days. Now, sometimes we will add a line in there to say that this must take place immediately. And I think one of the last ones is when Councilman Stokes tried to, what he did, he revived the ordinance for young people. The what's it called?
The curfew.
The curfew. That's it. And so sometimes you'll say this takes place in 30 days. Now, one council member did say I think we need to add a sunset to it because I see Jackson being different 10, 15 years from now. He made the amendment on the floor. It did not pass. So, once we did the whole curfew, it eventually passed. But that's just how it is. And again, you just have to know where your votes are coming from, know who support you got, and then, we just pass it that way.
Okay. So, I watch the city council meetings anytime I get a chance, and I look at it pretty much like a corporate seating. The president is pretty much like the judge. You're presiding over it. And then you have, Robert's Rules of Order. You got, rules and policies that you have to follow. You can only speak at certain times, have to be recognized and all of that. Um, and I've always heard about matters going into committee. When something goes into committee, is that a matter where it has to have further discussion or further research, or what's that?
So when things go into committee, and most of our committee meetings are public also, it's less red tape, so to speak. It's more casual than it is, the president just calling balls and strikes. Just like you a judge, you call balls and strikes, right? And so the president calls balls and strikes. We cannot debate from the chair. As part of Robert rules, which is our governing set of rules that we do. Now, if I do want to debate something, I'm going to have to hand the gavel to my vice president. It happened to me a couple of times under other presidents, and I wasn't ready, so I handed it back. But you call those balls and strikes, and you do what you can to, because you want to make it not only appear transparent, but you want it to be a transparent process. And sometimes, whereas during a council meeting, you may have public comment on an agenda item. In a committee meeting, you can bring in as many people as you want to hear from. All right, whether it's in favor of or against, but it's really more of a fact finding type situation, and that way you can vote it, keep both leave it in committee for a little while, which sometimes that means it's gonna die in committee, or you can go ahead and vote it out and get it on the next agenda.
Okay. So, can you walk us through how the council exercises its checks and balances role with the executive branch?
The two major things: claims and contracts. Your claims, sometimes we'll pass. In most instances, we're paying millions of dollars every month in claims.
To the million?
Claims, millions. Claims can be, contracts. It can be your garbage. It can be water. It could be, cell towers. It could be cars for JPD. It could be anything that we have to pay, right? So that's a claim. Sometimes you have some committee members who just don't trust what's in claims, and they won't vote on it. But again, we've been knocking 7-0 real strong under my leadership to vote on claims, because if we don't pass claims, we can't pay the bills. Sometimes you hear about City of Jackson not paying bills; they can't get vendors. You got to vote on claims. Now, with respect to the administration brings us contracts. If we don't like the contract, we vote it up or down. You know, sometimes, and there have been some contracts that as president, I've tabled them, or I've put it into committee to make sure that we get more fact finding. Or we do more fact finding to make sure that we are not only knowledgeable of all the ins and outs of the contract, but making sure that what we're passing is what the city of Jackson needs. Okay, and so that's your checks and balances right there. Because again, we can't enter into contract. We could do a resolution encouraging the mayor, not mandating that he does it, but encouraging the mayor to enter into a contract. And then, of course, the mayor, I think after we approve a contract, he has 10 days to sign it. If he doesn't sign within that 10 days, then we got to start back over at square zero. But that's pretty much how it is, to make sure that everybody's lane is clear, that there is no encroachment, and making sure that there is transparency in municipal government.
Okay. So that claims piece, that sounds like spending power to me. I'm an old political science major, and we always talk about Congress and the spending power. We will say,
Yep.
okay, the president can say we go on to war, but Congress got to give that money, got to appropriate those funds for the war. So,
Exactly. Exactly. And, we haven't had a shutdown. I know some previous administrations have had a furlough. We can make a decision on that. We can freeze the budget. We can freeze certain accounts. We can, there have been instances where as council has voted to defund the mayor's office. But that's the kind of politics I don't want to get involved in. But that's the power of the council. We're like, mom and dad. We got the power of the purse, and if something's not going right, or if something is kind of suspicious, or we feel like it's just not in the best interest of the city of Jackson and its citizens, then we can freeze it.
Okay. Um, how was the council involved in developing and approving the city budget each year?
So typically, and we're in a new administration, so we're still transitioning. Usually, um, we go ahead and communicate our asks, our priorities. That's each council person, each ward will meet with the administration and tell them, hey, this is what we want. Or this issue has been going on for 5 or 6 years. Like I have a bridge that's been out for about 6, 7 years. That's a Shaw Road Bridge out in West Side. And so and I want to be clear, I was able to allocate the money to do that this time, take care of it this time. But the mayor brings us what he or she wants out of the budget. Okay. We deliberate. We had a couple of weeks of deliberations. We moved some things around. We defunded some activities. And then of course we passed the budget. And once we passed the budget, we deliver that budget back to the mayor and say, here, good luck. We know that, our tax base has eroded over the past few decades. We know that we've had issues with the water, the enterprise system. But and like this time, because we have a new administration and they haven't really had a lot of time to get in there and just really kind of see where all the money is, we passed a pretty flat budget. That's why you didn't see really anybody getting any raises or anything this year. But next year, we do kind of expect some changes to be done from this administration.
Okay. All right. So when residents ask about contracts, hiring, department operations, where does the council's authority begin and end?
So we can just vote contracts up or down. Um, just like the garbage contract, that was a big issue
Yeah.
during my first term. And so, the council, 4 votes, you decide whether or not you go vote it up or down. And so the mayor, he has to execute the contract with his signature. He has so many days to do that. But again, council members cannot enter into contracts. I can't just go find a company and say, hey, bring your bulldozers over here, come over here in Shady Oaks and, clean out this ditch. I can't do that. I got to go through the mayor to do that. What was the other part of your question?
About contracts, hiring, and department operations.
All right. So when it comes to employees, the city council member each city council member has a clerk, one or two. He has a full-time clerk and a part-time clerk. I just have one clerk, and that's Valerie Brown. She runs my office. We also have the clerk of the council, and you have, I think, 3 chief deputy clerks under her, and they are the ones who do the minutes. They do a lot of the fact finding, a lot of the research for us. They do a lot of the binding and just really carrying out the support level of each council member. That's it for the city in terms of who council members can employ or who we can direct. All the other 2,000 plus employees fall under the mayor. Okay, we can't hire or fire. Now, what we can do is put forth a vote of, say, for instance, no confidence on one of the confirmed leaders that the mayor may have put up, say, for instance, Parks and Recs or HR or something like that. We can do something like that. But again, that doesn't mean that the mayor has to hold to what we say. It's just a resolution. We put forth a lot of resolutions. So that's pretty much it. So all those day-to-day functions, those fall under the mayor's authority.
Okay. What tools or committees does the council use to oversee spending and hold departments accountable?
So we have the finance committee, and that committee is actually what helps to plan the budget and to vote the budget out to get it before the council, right? 6 of us are on that committee. Um, every president goes ahead and put every council member on the committee, but you have one who faithfully says, I humbly decline. I don't want to be on this committee. I want to be on this committee and this committee, right? And so that finance committee is where we really get into the weeds of discussing how the money is being spent. And then, of course, during our regular council meetings, when we come up for claims, anything that is questionable, we can either pull it off claims and discuss it right then, or we could pull it off claims and put it in committee to discuss. But that's pretty much how it is. I remember there was a issue with JPD purchasing a vehicle. They purchased a $240,000 surveillance van, and it's a nice van. But I had some,
Saudi.
yeah, I had some huge questions about, this purchase, because in my mind, that could have gotten like 7 or 8 patrol cars, which is what we really, really need. And so what I did was, because I had some questions, the other council members had questions, I pulled it out of claims and put it into committee. We had a whole hearing on this one particular expenditure. Eventually, after all hearts were satisfied, we voted it out of claims, voted it out of committee, put it back on claim, and so we eventually passed it at the next meeting. And so, I mean, that's pretty much how it goes. It doesn't seem interesting to a lot of people, but it really, when you really get into the weeds of things, it's very interesting.
All right. So, how does the council ensure transparency and fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers?
So, one thing that my predecessor, to keep the stamps, told me, he said, Grizzell, you got to read. You got to read. And so, we get our binders or our agenda packets on maybe Thursday, and you got to spend that weekend kind of going over all the items, the contracts. I've seen it be as short as 400 pages, and I've seen it be as large as 1,300 pages. But I will say that I'm very proud of this council because they read. They read beforehand, and I'm not sure. And I'm gonna go ahead and call them out, but Kevin Parkinson, Ward 7, he reads every single word, and I can always depend on him during the work sessions to ask a lot of questions. And Lachey Brown Thomas, she's doing an exceptional job. Tina Clay, they do a lot of reading, so it's going to be kind of hard to get things over on anybody with this council. And so, we look at where a lot of the money is going. We have the budget book. We know what the bottom line looks like under each account, and we're looking at what's coming through. If I see fuel man, because we know JPD, JFD, they need fuel man, right? But if I see somebody in planning is using, and this is just all hypothetical, but if I see somebody in planning spend $3,000 on gas in a month, we got to question that. It's just like your own personal finances. If your wife, your significant other, decides to go off on a shopping spree, and you pull in all the account information, you see all these debits and credits, you go ask some questions. And so that's pretty much how it is. You got to really fine tune comb. You got to comb through claims with a fine tooth comb, read those contracts, make sure that the terms of the contracts make sense, ask questions. Peter Taylorson comes to us. He's the CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer. He comes to us with a wealth of knowledge. He was the board attorney for the county. He was city attorney for a while, and he did some other stuff in the city under several administrations. And so, if things just don't sound right, because we're all blessed with that little hair on the back of our neck that stands up, we can take it to him. We can take it to the city attorney who works for the mayor's office and the council, and make sure that things are on the up and up. And also, our meetings are recorded. We post the minutes. The council speaks through its minutes, and anybody can get a copy of that at any time.
Yeah, asking questions, that's so important. It made me think about when I was working at the public defender's office, and we had a vehicle assigned to the office that we would use to drive down to the Raymond jail and to drive to go to court out there. And we had a fuel man card, and the person that was driving the car, when it was on empty, you're supposed to fill it up. So I got in the car to go to work one morning to go to the courthouse. and it was on E. So I got the fuel man card, and I said, you know what, I'm running late. I'm just gonna put like $5 in here and run on the court. And my boss said, hold on, $5? What's going on here? Was this something you put in your personal car? I had to answer that question. But ask the questions is important, and also reading. Um, of course, with being a judge, it's a lot of reading. I mean, people present things to you, and sometimes things have multiple interpretations,
Mm-hmm.
and you gotta sit down and dig into it because once you sign off on it, it's yours at that point.
Right, right. And also, especially when it comes to spending and transparency, the city has a lot of vehicles. And, sometimes when you just out riding out, you may see a city vehicle at a restaurant in another city. You may see it parked at a house in another city, and you just got to ask some questions like, why is this out here? Why are we using city resources to wine and dine outside of Jackson? Why is this vehicle parked outside of Jackson? I remember one time I saw one in Carthage and I had to ask questions about it, and of course it made some folks' ears stand up. But if it's my job to help manage the budget, I need to understand why are we using the city's resources in this manner.
Look, I bet when they saw you in cars, they said, "Oh man, I saw Grizzell. Let me let me call my boss."
And
Look,
I was very clear about it. I'm a snitch, so hey man, look, I was very clear about it because if I didn't see it, somebody else would have saw it and brought it to my attention. And I'm really glad we got some good residents out there who are really engaged and who are really paying attention, and they don't mind asking some questions, especially mine, because if something doesn't look right, they gonna call me no matter what time of day.
yeah, I mean, one thing we know that you paying attention in your community. I remember when I was running for office, you sent me a text, "Hey, what's up with these signs?" So I mean, you paying attention.
Yeah, man. Hey, even with the signs, it's against the law, really, to put signs in certain places. And we have this litter situation. That's why I tell folks when you run, pick your signs up. When I ran, I made sure that my crew they had 7 days to get every sign because when we put signs down, we wrote down kind of the areas where we put them down. Now, if it's somebody's in somebody's yard, that's one thing. Even though we tried to get those too. Some folks I
Yeah,
want to keep my sign. No, we're gonna take them signs too. But you don't want to be seen as litter in the city.
yeah,
And we have folks who, probably ran 2, 3 years ago. We still find the signs in ditches and stuff.
yeah,
Get your signs up.
yeah. All right. So, what challenges arise when priorities between the council and the mayor differ, especially around funding or capital projects?
Man, that's when you really got to put on your hat. You really we're not going to always agree on everything, right? We know that. Even Kevin Parkinson, he joked one time when several of us disagreed with the mayor on one thing. And so he said, "Well, I guess the honeymoon is over." I said, "Well, it lasted longer than I thought." But what's interesting is that, Mayor Horn has been in politics a long time. And so he knows how to call each council member and just talk it out. Right. And so eventually, he got what he wanted, but that's what you have to do. You can't harbor ill feelings toward anybody. There are going to be fallouts, but what I try to make sure we do is fall out behind closed doors and make sure that whatever we do, we have a unified front in front of the public because that's what they want to see. They don't want to see any fighting. They don't want to see no drama. And so when things just don't work out, because even the mayor, he's taken a couple of losses. I try to get him what he needs, but he's taking some losses and the council taking some losses. But there were no hard feelings because we were able to just get in there and just talk it out. So there was, you pretty much knew where your votes were going to come from, or even if you had a chance.
All right. So, as council president and ward representative, how do you balance your citywide leadership responsibilities with the needs of your own ward?
I tell my folks, I'm president of the city of council, which means I'm all of Jackson. But Ward 4 is a priority. And I live in Ward 4. I got amazing people in Ward 4. I support over 22,000 residents. and in many places in the state, that's a whole city or two, but they know that they are a priority. And so you gotta, manage your time. You gotta, figure things out. Again, our clerks, my clerk Valerie, our other clerks of council, they are a huge support, a huge level of support for us. If she can't get something done, then there's always another clerk who's going to jump in and help. And they know the language, they know the processes. We're not in office every single day, but they know how to carry on. Responding to emails and other messages, who to point, the sources of support are, and how to get things done. And so, my clerk sometimes jokes around that she's Councilwoman 8 because she helps to really pull a lot of that weight
Mhm.
around there. And so again, we would not be successful without our clerks.
Yeah. All right. So, what does effective constituent service look like in practice?
One, I'm glad that we do have a constituent services department, right?
Mhm.
That's your mayor's hotline. You can dial 311 depending on where you are, or you can dial 601 960 1111. That office is under the mayor. And so what that office does is take in all the calls, all the complaints. If there's a pothole, if there's flooding, if garbage didn't get picked up, um, I mean, the calls are kind of all over the place. You even have some domestic calls where, I had a call one time where, a couple just couldn't get right and they wanted us to come out there and help squash the matter. I said, I can't get involved in that. You even hear things about, cats in trees, cell phones stolen, all kinds of stuff. And so, but what that department does is provide a liaison type level of support between the mayor's office and the departments. And so they take the calls, they type it into the system, and they dispatch it to each one of those departments and make sure that things get done. What I do is send an email. And even when my constituents call, I tell them to ask for a tracking number. That way, if things kind of, belabor too long, or maybe, a week or two out, and nothing's really done, I'll send an email and say, hey, this is the tracking number. What's the status of this issue being resolved here? But constituent services, that's what they do. They take the complaints, they dispatch it out to the respective departments, and they help to provide support to the council as well as the mayor's office.
Okay. Then also the 311 app. I used that recently, reported a pothole, and I mean, within 24 hours, that pothole was fixed. I mean, that was my first time using it. I was pleasantly surprised.
So, we've been trying to get that back up and running, and we're very glad because even with that app, you could upload pictures, you can do all kinds of stuff in
Yeah.
that app. And it helps to keep you updated in terms of, where it is in the process. Um, and it was real costly. So we want to make sure that everybody uses that app. But
Okay.
since you mentioned potholes, let me explain something. Mississippi tort law protects municipalities also. Okay.
Mhm.
If Judge Yemi King passes a pothole and he doesn't report it, but Brian Grizzell come behind him and hit it and lose a tire, and it's never been reported, nobody gets any payment, right? The city is
Right.
not required to pay. We've had issues, folk calling, Commissioner Willie Simmons' office about a pothole on 49 or 55. But if that pothole was not reported, nobody is required to pay, and they're not going to pay.
Right.
So whenever you do pass a pothole, go ahead and take a minute, dial 960-1111, call it in, or you can take time and put in the app, because again, when you do that, that means it's reported, that the city is aware of it, and they'll be more likely to pay.
I mean, I can imagine some potholes go a period of time and nobody probably ever reports because everybody just maybe waiting on somebody else to do it. You know?
Yeah, and from what I'm understanding too, a lot of folk kind of confuse potholes with sinkholes.
Hmm.
They look alike, but over time, a sinkhole gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and sometimes it is a very strong message. Say, hey, there's something going on underground, and we've seen that a lot around the zoo. A lot of times in your older areas, like my own neighborhood is an older area, and sometimes you just see this thing just keep growing and growing and growing until at some point there's a collapse. There was a collapse on my own street, up the street, and it started out what we thought was a pothole, but it
Uh-huh.
was really a sinkhole that has some pipes that eventually collapsed, and it took down most of the street. And so, again, that's why it's important to go ahead and just report everything that you see. I tell folks all the time, when you see something, say something so that we can know and try to fix it.
Look, I'm kind of ashamed to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. That was my first time ever reporting a pothole in my life.
Oh man,
Yes, and I've hit plenty of them.
oh man. No, and honestly, we don't really think about it until it affects us. Until that rim of yours get bent, and you gotta shell out about $1,000. We even had a council person who hit two potholes recently, and neither one of them were reported. But I bet you they're on her radar right now. She's gonna do everything she can to report things and try to encourage other residents to report these potholes and sinkholes.
Okay. All right. So, how do community voices influence council decisions or legislation?
Again, we have some residents who are kind of hands off, and we got some who you would wonder, do you work for the city, do you work for the county, do you work for the state, because they are very astute, they are paying very close attention to how government operates. The mayor, he asked us each to give him some names to serve on some of his advisory committees. He has advisory committees dealing with the youth. He has advisory committees dealing with public works, public safety, fire, parks and recreation, human and cultural services. He has committees, advisory committees where lay folk, you know, residents who are interested in participating in some aspect of government or just supporting the mayor, where they can come and serve. And so each council person, they have their own thing. But for me, in Ward 4, I have some of the strongest neighborhood associations you will ever find in this city. And so I lean heavily on my presidents. In South Jackson, you got the Association of South Jackson Neighborhoods, who is led by Mr. Ernest Ward. They do a lot of work, and they make sure they stay on top of things. And then, of course, you have the Jackson Association of Neighborhoods, who has played an instrumental part in terms of making sure that the city is supported, and that not only elected officials are aware of what the city needs are, but also pushing forward their projects and their priorities. And so, you know, we're only as strong as the people that we support, and that's why it's important to make sure they're educated and make sure they're engaged. And when they come telling us, Grizzell, I don't like this, you don't need to vote on this, so we get that meaningful conversation going. And then I tell them, hey, my people don't want this. I talked to several presidents. That's a lot of rooftops. And they say they don't want it. And so that's how the vote is influenced.
Yeah, because man, you can't just sit in your office and come up with all the ideas on your own. You got to be out there in your ward and your communities to see what they want and what they need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, I got some real strong, real strong associations in all parts of the ward. And so, again, even those who are not part of those associations, they're very vocal in terms of what, they need and in terms of what government should look like and what government should be doing. So you just got to be open and, listen. Some folks just really want to be heard. Listen and just do what you can to support them.
Okay. And that takes me to my next question. What role do neighborhood associations and civic clubs play in helping the council understand on the ground issues?
That is where your salient vote is. Your constituent groups, your stakeholders. That is that is your mechanism of support. That is your mechanism of that's your voice, and then a lot of times it's your voters. You know, and you can't betray them. And so, uh, you know, we have a strong department in planning that's led by Dr. Robbie Smith. And I tell folks all the time, well, let's go ahead and start a block club because there's power in numbers. Let's start a block club. Let's start an association. Dr. Robin Smith can come out. She can walk your neighborhood with you. She can meet people. She can actually help you to establish an association or a block club and make sure that your meeting schedule set up and make sure that she's able to help schedule city directors and other employees come out and talk to the people and listen to them and take their concerns. There's always power in numbers, and so again, and even if you look across Jackson, those strongest neighborhood associations are the ones who really deliver, and they really hold us to the fire. And they even know people, who are not part of the association. They talk, sometimes advocate for them too. So it just all really works out like that.
So as a judge, I have the benefit of rules and rules of ethics that prohibit me from talking to people about their issues personally that's going to come before me. So I can say, hey, I can't talk to you about it. I just can't do it. But I can just imagine you get calls and texts probably all day, every day about these issues. How do you handle it? How do you go through it?
You know, it just depends. There are just no days off. Um, you know, uh, Sometimes you have to show up at a crime scene. Sometimes, on one Saturday I had to go attend 6 funerals because you build these relationships. These folks become family to you. And then of course our clerks stream a lot of calls. They take calls, they return calls, they respond to text. I respond to text. Now texting is easiest for me. You will always get a quicker response because a lot of times I'm in a meeting. We we stuck in meetings, and so I'll be like, hey, in a meeting, text me. They may not say anything, but I may not remember because I'm human. I may not remember to call you back until next week. So, but you just gotta, manage your time, manage your processes, and make sure that you have the support necessary to respond. But you always want to respond.
Absolutely. What's the process for collaboration between the council, the mayor, and the department heads when tackling citywide problems like water, infrastructure, or crime?
So a lot of times we'll talk things out in the meeting, during the meeting, which isn't always the best practice, but hey, it's a captive audience. Sometimes, we may have a resident like, I had one resident who complained about a ditch 8 years ago that still was not cleaned out. And she said 84 gallons of water in her house when the ditch flooded recently.
Mm.
Well, I said, well, hey, come for public comment. You get 3 minutes and you can say whatever you need with respect to your issue. But the mayor is sitting right there and his directors are sitting right there, and it's a captive audience. Also, we have committee meetings. Again, you can hash out a lot of things there. The mayor, he's invited to attend. The CAO is there, and we invite others to attend these meetings. To make sure that we're on the same page with stuff. But also, if there's something pressing, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call the mayor. I'm gonna call my colleagues and say, hey, this is what I need done. I need your support. Then call the mayor and say, hey, mayor, look, I need this done. You've been over there, you've seen it, you heard from these constituents, and let's go ahead and do what we need to do. And and he said he may say, well, Grizzell, do we have the money for it? Let me check. Even though he has the control and everything under his directive, I'm gonna check. And if I need to get some votes to move some money around from one thing to the next, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. Dr. Grizzell, let me say this. I'm so impressed with code enforcement. I mean, they had really ramped things up. Let me tell you a story. So I bought this house from the state, Secretary of State, and the grass was probably taller than me, and I'm 6'3". So you couldn't even hardly see the house. I bought it and I cut the grass, and as soon as I cut it, code enforcement sent me a letter saying, hey, you better fix this house. I was like, man, y'all couldn't even see this house. But as soon as I cut the grass, they were on it. So I really appreciate them.
Well, it was probably coming anyway. Because, and if I could speak to that, we are fully staffed in code enforcement, and they're working really hard to help try to clean up a lot of dilapidation in this city. I got one street. The state owns a lot of properties, and I try to encourage folks to go through the Secretary of State office and bid on some of these properties and take them. I got one street not too far from here. It's got 9 state-owned properties, 9. And then out in sub number 2, we get some complaints depending on the area in sub 2. I saw one lady with, she had 14 state-owned properties on her street. And so, the state just recently passed legislation that allow us to move or clean up these properties a lot quicker. But before then, our hands were really tied in terms of what we could do to some of these state-owned properties. Now, code enforcement, they do more than just go out to your property and see if your grass cut, if you got a car on your front yard, or even a basketball goal at the end of your driveway, which of course is still unlawful. They do, a lot of your rental registration. They do your asbestos testing. They do a lot of your inspections on your properties. And so, and honestly, it takes about 90 days to really get some movement. And so code enforcement operates under the 2018 international standard where they try to get property owners to voluntarily comply. But if they can't get their property owner to comply, then they're going to end up in environmental court in front of Judge Reynolds. Judge Reynolds does not play. Judge Reynolds is the one who put the Oyo Hotel on the map. He's the one who locked up the guy who had the big building on Briarwood, and of course, we have a lot of vacant landlords, a lot of vacant property owners. And so we have to go through a lot of process to try to locate them and to get them back here before a judge.
I go to different HOA meetings, and sometimes, people are frustrated. Why can't we just tear it down? But folks have rights. There's due process. You got to have notice, and that stuff takes time.
And we would love to say, hey, go tear this house down. Go clean this property up for us. We'll pass the contract no matter what. But property owners, again, they have rights. Tenants have rights. I'm going through an issue now with one of the companies that own a lot of properties here in the city of Jackson. If you think about some of the shootings that took place recently in my ward, a lot of those properties are owned by this one company. And so I went out there. The company is in Madison County. And I went out there. They didn't want to let me in. So I started banging on the door. And then one of the secretaries came across around the side and she said, hey, look, my hands are tied, but this is who you need to talk to. She slid me a little piece of paper. She even told me about the property manager wasn't that nice. I started kind of working around because even when, we tried to go through the national office, it's just very hard to get to these people. And so it's almost like, Wizard of Oz, you're trying to see the wizard. But what I'm trying to do now is working on a moratorium for some of these rental companies. Because again, we passed a rental registration ordinance. You have to have a local manager, but these local managers are not playing fair. And they're just putting people in just any neighborhood. They're not vetting tenants. And some of these tenants are wreaking havoc in some of these, especially the most quiet communities. And so we got to get a handle on it.
So how can residents better engage the council with meetings or committees to make sure their concerns are heard?
Come visit City Hall. Come to the council meeting. We'll have them at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And then I think the second meeting, which is still a Tuesday, it's at 6 p.m. And we changed that back to the pre-COVID rules because we want to make sure that City Hall is accessible to the people. And we're going to also take the show on the road. We've been looking at a couple of venues that will hold a lot of people. Hopefully Thayer Mara will be back up and running. We can have a city council meeting there. But we want to make sure that we, bring City Hall to the people. And also, each one of us, we have town hall meetings. Show up at our town hall meetings. I had one when all the violence was taking place in my ward, and that was packed out. But I want to see y'all at the regular one when there's nothing really going on. Come, let's talk, eat some snacks, kind of talk about, what's impacting your neighborhood and how I can help and how we can get the city and administration involved to help mitigate, or clarify these issues.
There's been so many times I saw someone come to a meeting and come to the public comment section and make their comment and get directed to exactly who they need to talk to get it resolved right there on the spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that's very important that we do that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So, what are some recent examples of where the council's decisions directly improve quality of life in Jackson?
Everything we do. No. Uh, well, one of the most recent ones, the third party administrator came in and wanted a resolution to support a water rate increase. And we stood 10 toes down and said no, because again, the water issue is not new and it's far from over. The collection rate is very low. In fact, is less than what it was when the city had control of the water. And like I asked on the record, to me, I feel like if your collection rate was a lot higher, it would be make more sense for you to then come in and ask for an increase, but a lot less. The water system should not be on the backs of those who only pay. We all got to pay. We use water, we got to pay. And so, for me, it would make more sense for you to be more diligent and get your collection rate up. Then say, hey, we need to come in and raise the water rate probably a dollar, maybe 50 cents. And then you could probably find a common ground there. But you have the convenience fee, which is $40. Depending on the size of your meter, that fee can go up to $2,500. I have some constituents who own businesses and they have a large meter and they're still having to pay that large meter fee, even though they're not using that kind of water. But that's how it's been established through the administrator and the federal court. But it's those decisions where we not only look at the priorities of the city and our residents, but also do what we can to protect those who are the least of these, because we want to make sure that, we're being fair to everybody and that there's equity and ethics and social justice in all of our decisions.
Absolutely. So looking ahead, how do you see the council's role evolving to meet Jackson's future challenges?
So part of our challenge is dealing with right now stuff, right? But we also have to plan for the future. The planning department has the fabric, which is a long-term plan, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to, plan the city, its growth, its investments, and everything. We need to kind of figure out what we want the city to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now. Where we've struggled, because I've served as a civil service commissioner for the city, as well as a planning commissioner before I became a councilman. And we've had an issue trying to figure out what Jackson really is. And honestly, we're really a big college town. We have quite a few universities right here. We have 54 parks, 53, 54 parks. We have the state's level 1 trauma center, the teaching hospital right here. We are the center of research for the city of Jackson. And I think that's what we really need to kind of use in terms of making sure that we understand what we are, other than being the capital city for the state of Mississippi. But we need to understand what we are, what our population ages look like, and try to plan according to that and what we want our city to look like. And that includes new rooftops, building new communities, recruiting new developers in. And some folks are afraid of gentrification. Gentrification is happening everywhere. But we do know that part of turning a lot of these neighborhoods around, tear down these dilapidated properties, build a new one there. I went to um, Nashville about a year or so ago, and I got a frat brother who's a councilman there, and he drove me around and he showed me firsthand some of the things that the city did to fight dilapidation. And on this street, you may have a duplex, but right next to it, you may have $1 million home or $250,000 home. And so people want new stuff, and so you just have to really create these communities with these supports, including parks and libraries, because those are also part of our infrastructure, to make sure that people want to live in Jackson and make sure that people, will have a really good quality of life.
Yeah. Look, I look at Houston. I went to law school in Houston at Texas Southern in the third ward of Houston, and their area is more so like West Jackson. Texas Southern's kind of like Jackson State is in the urban area. And when I go back, it just blows my mind now. I see big mansions, just right in the middle of the neighborhood. And
Yeah. And even we have a lot of people who are actually moving here from Texas because and California because those places have gotten so expensive. And in a lot of our neighborhoods, our older neighborhoods, we're seeing where properties are going for 3 and 4 times more than what they actually appraised for, what they were 10, 15 years ago. So the interest is there, the promise is there. We have a successful school district. JPS is really strong. And, families look at that too. Where can my children go to school and learn and be successful? And so, again, we have to understand, what we are as a city, what we are as the capital of Mississippi, not just Jackson, but the capital of Mississippi, and make sure that we're making those plans and investments necessary for the future.
Yeah. And another big decision is going to be made soon. It's going to be our police chief.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, I see where there's a firm coming in, going to do a national search and all that good stuff.
So, you know, I think we believe that the council on the same page in terms of, we believe that the talent is already here. But I understand for transparency and objectivity, the mayor's desire to hire a firm and to do a national search. Sometimes you may need somebody to come in from the outside and kind of shake things up. The average lifespan of a chief has gotten down to about 2.5 years now, and that's across the nation.
Wow.
We don't have those chiefs who just live and die in their seat 20, 30 years. Some are career oriented, some want to get that, reset that high for in purse and head on out. And so we did pass the contract. There was a lot of discussion about, the necessity to go outside and do a national search. So we did go ahead and pass that agreement for the mayor. And, again, because I even had a lady officer ask me, she said, "Well, how do you apply?" And I said, "You know what? I don't know. There's no website. There's really no transparent process right now." So I took it to the mayor, and put it on his brain, and so here we are. And I hope that once they get to work, that we'll have a really good, transparent and objective process. And you know, again, I still feel that the chief may come from here, but and to make sure that everybody's at ease and to make sure that nobody's getting overlooked and to kind of calm any suspicions whatsoever about the process. But Jackson's top cop, I think that this is a pretty good a way to go. And also, what we understand from the contract is that if the next chief is chosen by this company and he or she does not make it a year, they're going to start the process over again for free. And so I did some googling. They have a lot of successes in finding a good chief, but again, we just got to play it out. I know Sheriff Jones, he was very clear that he does not want it. He does not want to stick around in it. So I'm pretty sure he's prodding the mayor. Hey, let's go ahead and get this done now. I want to get back get back to my world.
Right. Look, I would have want to have two courtrooms I had to deal with, so
Oh man.
totally understand it. So, and no matter who this firm chooses, I mean, the council still has to approve that person.
Yeah, we have the final say. Again, the mayor can put up whoever he wants, but we have the final say in terms of who will be our next chief.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Grizzell, is there anything you want to say in closing? Because we're approaching an hour, probably a little over now. But anything you want to say in closing?
I appreciate the time. I appreciate Women for Progress, and I really thank you for the invite. We're coming off of an amazing homecoming weekend. Everything was really good, and we got 29 days until JPS is out again, so
You
we're
count
good to
down, huh?
go. And go Tigers.
Look, I say this. There's one thing, Dr. Grizzell, you could have done better. You could have went to Lanier High School. Other than that, you're a good guy.
We can talk offline, but
All right.
you
Dr. Grizzell.
833 folks, y'all just think y'all just run the city, but
Yeah,
we know
look,
it's that blue and orange.
listen, I've invited you to our tailgate. I gave you an open invitation about 2 years ago. I'm still waiting on you now.
You did, but I get my ribs from Roche Jefferson over there, so I
That's
don't
my
have to.
classmate. Okay, yeah. All right, well, you good then. You good.
Yes, sir.
All right, Dr. Grizzell, thank you so much for coming on and educating us on the municipal process and local government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Take
All
care.
right, to the audience, thank you for tuning in to this episode with Dr. Grizzell. Have a great week.
All right.